The moment that clock turned red, my name was already on the line. But let me back up. 12 years ago, I walked into Hawthorne Ridge Holdings wearing a borrowed blazer and a half-dead laptop, and I never looked back. I didn't come from the Ivy League or talk like the executives with their yachts and LinkedIn-fueled egos. I came from discipline. I came from process. I came from watching people lie to auditors and thinking, there has to be a better way to trap them in their own chaos. So I built the better way. While everyone else climbed the org chart with speeches and smiles, I embedded my authority in source code and contractual control. Access gates, audit trails, segregation of duties that couldn't be massaged with charm. When they asked for a backup plan, I built 10. When they asked for risk maps, I drew blood vessels. Because that's what compliance was. The circulatory system of truth. And because our biggest client was a government-adjacent enterprise that didn't tolerate screw-ups, I embedded the concept of a live quarterly test. Not hypothetical, not rehearsed. Real. Every 3 months, our entire compliance framework had to prove itself in front of third-party auditors. Like a fire drill where the building actually caught fire. Pass it, and we kept our contract. Fail it, and a red digital clock started calculating liquidated damages, down to the second. Every tick cost the company $100,000, and buried in the center of it all was one role, one person, one credential, authorized stop officer. That was me. And believe me, I didn't get that title by accident. I designed it, fought for it. Tied it to a clause so deep in the master services agreement that half the legal team didn't know it existed until it was too late. By the way, if you're one of the 97% of listeners who haven't subscribed yet, take a second to hit that button and tap like. It means more than you know to the team bringing you these stories. We dig deep to bring you the stuff people don't talk about out loud, and every bit of support makes it possible to keep doing it. Now, back to the bloodbath. The irony is, I didn't need the spotlight. Never did. I wasn't flashy, I didn't gossip, I didn't chase the VP title. I just made myself indispensable in the most boring way possible, by being the last line of defense between the company and a compliance apocalypse. But indispensable only matters when people understand what you do. Grant Halverson didn't. He was the kind of man who walked into a room like he was allergic to humility, director of ops, fresh from a startup that imploded under 2 lawsuits and a data breach, but somehow still smug enough to act like Hawthorne Ridge was lucky to have him. And in his eyes, I wasn't an architect. I was a seat warmer, a remote worker, a nice to have. He called me the couch queen once in a meeting, chuckled when no one else did, thought he was being clever. I knew better than to fight him in the room. There's a rhythm to power, and Grant was still in the part where he mistook attention for authority, so I stayed quiet. Instead, I pulled up the internal control documents I'd authored 6 years ago, flipped to section 9.4 of the Control Governance Addendum, and there it was. My insurance policy written in black and white. Authorized stop officers shall remain continuously credentialed during any live compliance test. Revocation or lockout triggers penalty mode until reinstated by board-level override. Not a warning, not a guideline, a tripwire. I printed it, highlighted it, and slipped it into a folder I kept in my drawer, the one labeled "In Case of Idiot." Because the thing about traps is they don't need to scream, they just wait. He started slow, like most men who mistake smirks for strategy. First, it was ignoring my message. No reply, no read receipt, just a void where acknowledgement should have been. I'd written it the way I always did. Clear, documented, non-confrontational. Reminder that Friday's compliance test will require uninterrupted console access through EOD. Please ensure admin tokens remain unaltered. Simple, standard, necessary. Instead of a response, I got his ego. The next day, in a meeting about procurement timelines, he made his first little jab. Said it so casually he didn't even look up from his tablet. Some of us still show up to the office in person. Pause. Just saying. I didn't flinch, but I felt the shift. He was performing for the room, testing the temperature, seeing who'd laugh, who'd follow. Weak men always need a laugh track. By Thursday, he'd escalated. You know, he said in the budget sync, I've been thinking we need more hustle and less horizontal productivity. What do you think, Couch Commander? A few people chuckled, the kind of nervous laughter you hear when no one wants to become the next target. My camera was off. my mic muted, but my silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound of a woman sharpening the blade you didn't even know she kept under the table. What Grant didn't realize, what he never realized, is that my authority didn't come from his approval. It came from the foundations, the architecture, the parts of the system people ignore until they're on fire. He thought he was being clever. I was just being patient. When the meeting ended, I didn't go cry or call HR. I opened the Control Governance Addendum, scrolled to the section I knew by heart, 9.4. I'd written it during the third CEO's reign after the 2017 breach scare that almost nuked our government contract. I'd pushed for it even when legal said it was too rigid. That was the point. Rigid systems don't collapse under pressure. People do. I reread the clause, then printed it in hard copy. Section 9.4. Authorized stop officers shall remain continuously credentialed during any live compliance test. Revocation or lockout triggers penalty mode until reinstated by board-level override. No gray area, no workaround, no ambiguity. Revocation triggers the meter. I highlighted the sentence in neon yellow, slid it into my folder behind a copy of the client contract, and placed the folder under the front right corner of my keyboard tray. The same tray Grant had mocked me for using. People underestimate documentation. They think it's boring, bureaucratic. What they forget is that paper doesn't flinch. Paper doesn't fold under pressure or play office politics. Paper just proves. So I waited. I didn't need revenge. I had structure, and structure always outlasts sarcasm. The smile he gave the camera made my skin crawl. You know the type. Tight around the mouth, smug in the eyes, rehearsed in front of a bathroom mirror. Grant was in love with his own reflection, especially when it had a captive audience. He kicked off the all hands like a man who thought charisma came in PowerPoint form. Something about Q4 momentum and accountability as a culture. I'd heard it all before. Slides full of buzzwords, none of them tied to anything real. Then he stopped clicking, looked straight into the webcam like he could see me on the other side, and with a pause that reeked of premeditation, he dropped it. I don't pay you to sit on a couch. No context, no name, just venom, wrapped in plausible deniability. A few nervous chuckles, even from people who'd called me privately for help navigating his sloppy project management. Then came the real move. He flipped tabs, opened the admin console, one he barely understood, might I add, and clicked with all the subtlety of a toddler slapping piano keys. Remote access revoked, effective immediately. If you want to work, come in. He didn't even flinch. He thought he was being bold. Taking charge, the big man enforcing rules on the lazy worker. He didn't know he was pulling the pin on a grenade buried 6 years deep in policy and contracts. Because the moment he hit that button, I saw it. My authentication token, system level, audit tier, hard-coded into the compliance stack, turned gray, revoked, stripped, cut off. I didn't say a word. No frantic Slack messages, no panicked emails, no pleading in front of my coworkers for dignity or clarity. I just shut my laptop, stood up, and walked out of my office with the same calm precision I'd built into every control mechanism that kept Hawthorne Ridge from drowning in its own arrogance. He thought he'd embarrassed me. What he actually did, was create a control violation so catastrophic it would trigger automatic damages if not reversed within hours. But he didn't know that, because he never read the fine print. Men like Grant never do. To him, it was a symbolic gesture, a flex. To the system, it was a breach, logged, time-stamped, visible to every auditor on the contract. He wanted to make an example of me, wanted to send a message. Well, he did. Unfortunately for him, the message went straight to the compliance engine, and the engine doesn't forget. Friday, 9 a.m. sharp. They gathered in the 6th floor conference room, glass walls, recycled air, overpriced coffee. Grant sat 2 seats from the chairman, probably still high off his little performance the day before. Legal was there. So was the client-side auditor, flown in just for this quarterly dance. Everyone showed up like it was business as usual, and for the first 30 seconds, it was. The test began. Prompts initiated. Routine system pings lit up in green, access control, data trail validation, role permissions, all the things I'd architected to prove again and again that we weren't just compliant on paper, we were compliant by design. Then it happened. A blink, a pause, and one blinking line on the top of the dashboard. Authorize stop officer. Disconnected. That was the first red flag. The second came with sound. A tone, sharp, synthetic, buzzed through the overhead speakers, and a banner expanded across the projection screen like a police siren in digital form. Then the red clock appeared. $100,000 per hour. Penalty mode active. No one breathed. The auditor sat back in her chair, face still, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for someone to notice they'd just driven off a cliff. The general counsel's face went flat. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask questions. She just turned her head slowly toward the bottom of the dashboard, where the system printed one very specific line in gray font. Stop authority holder. My name. Grant's name wasn't anywhere on it. He leaned forward, squinting like he could will it away. Can't it just reset it? Someone asked. Someone from sales, maybe, or finance, trying to save face by pretending this was a glitch and not a rules-based execution. The general counsel didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Looking, I'm sure, for the last copy of the Control Governance Addendum. Section 9.4, the one no one had read. The one that turned a petty managerial tantrum into $1 million mistake. The chairman's face didn't move, but I know that look. It's the look of a man calculating losses against pride. And from what I heard later, he didn't even blink when the clock hit $196.10 by the end of the second hour. As for Grant, the color drained out of him like a slow puncture, because for the first time, the performance was over, and now the machine was speaking. In money, in language even Grant couldn't pretend to misunderstand. They say panic spreads faster than fire, and I believe it now. The moment that red clock hit its second tick, the room turned into a live reenactment of corporate denial meets compliance panic. First came the disbelief. The IT lead, nice guy, always stayed neutral, started typing furiously, trying to reissue my credentials. No dice. The system kicked back a rejection. Credential revocation is locked during active test window. Reinstatement requires override protocol. They figured that was a fluke. Tried again. Different route. Emergency token. Token escalation blocked by governance lockout. Authorized stop officer disconnected. They tried brute force, admin access from the inside. 2 attempts in, the screen flashed an alert that bled across the dashboard in red. Privilege escalation detected. Unauthorized override attempt. And worse, the auditor saw all of it, in real time, every key press, every violation, logged, time-stamped, filed under an event ID that would be included in the final report. There was no rug big enough to sweep this under. Because I didn't build the system to be user-friendly. I didn't design it for feelings or convenience or ego. I built it to be courtroom-proof. I built it so no one, not one single human being, could unilaterally reset the safeguards, especially not someone who had just revoked my access over a public Zoom humiliation. You see, that was the whole point of the architecture. It required a dual signature override, board level only, and even that had to come with a written attestation justifying the breach. The policy was crystal clear. In the event of stop officer disconnect during a live audit window, reinstatement shall only proceed under Board Resolution Protocol 4.2c. They hadn't read it, but they'd signed it. 2 years ago, in a room full of highlighters and coffee-stained packets marked urgent. Now it was law. The general counsel started muttering to herself, flipping through her notes like she could manifest a workaround out of sheer desperation. Grant, on the other hand, had gone pale. He kept looking back at the screen like it owed him a do-over. And then the sentence started. Just get her back in. Just fix it. Just get her credentials restored. Over and over, like the problem was technical. Like the system was broken instead of working exactly as I'd intended it to. One of the engineers, I heard later it was Sam from the risk team, said it out loud. We can't fix this. It's not broken. It's working exactly the way she built it. The red clock didn't care. It kept counting. $1,667 every minute. Grant's voice got quieter each time he repeated it. Just get her back in. Just fix it. But you can't undo architecture with volume. You can't yell a lock open. You either follow the protocol or you pay the price. At 10:17 a.m., it wasn't the high-powered counsel or the execs in tailored suits who cracked it. It was Maya, second-year associate, sharp as a whip and quiet as a whisper. She'd been scanning the master-client contracts in the back corner, flipping through PDFs like her life depended on it. And maybe, in a way, it did. Because when she sat up straighter and said, "I think I found something," the entire room shifted toward her like gravity had changed direction. She read it once to herself. Then again, louder. Clause 13.4 in the Master Services Agreement with Haverland Systems. That's when the heads started turning. It wasn't in my HR file, not in the employee handbook, not in the org chart with its ever-shifting titles and buzzword rebrands. No, this was embedded in the contract that actually paid the bills, the one with the federal compliance hooks, the one the board never touched unless absolutely necessary. She kept reading, her voice steadier now. Penalty mode activates upon loss of designated stop authority during live compliance validation. Penalty continues until authority is reinstated. If unresolved within 48 hours, client may terminate for cause and invoke additional liquidated damages. Silence. 48 hours. That was the cliff they hadn't seen, and they were already dangling off it by the wrists. The red clock wasn't just a billing meter anymore, it was a fuse. And the bomb it was attached to? Client trust, regulatory standing. Half the company's revenue, gone in 2 days if they couldn't reverse a decision made by a man who thought Zoom humiliation was a leadership style. The general counsel paled. The auditor didn't say a word. She just underlined the clause in her notes and marked it Material Risk Escalation. Grant, finally understanding the magnitude, looked like someone had drained every watt of arrogance from his spine. His voice cracked as he asked, "So, what does that mean? Like, how serious is this?" Maya didn't even blink. "It means you didn't just lock out an employee," she said. "You triggered breach conditions." That word. Breach. Not a mistake, not a hiccup, not something you could blame on a glitchy VPN. A breach event. Which meant the client had rights now. Strong ones. Termination rights, litigation rights, and liquidated damages that didn't just accrue. They stacked. Because the designated stop authority wasn't a placeholder, wasn't some title they could slap on the next warm body. It was me. And the clause I'd written, no, demanded, was there because I knew someday someone would treat risk like it was optional, like authority was decorative. Grant had turned a routine, tightly controlled validation run into a contractual emergency because he couldn't stand the idea of someone doing critical work from a living room. He clicked a button to prove a point. Now the point was screaming back in six-figure intervals. And the only way out? Me. At 11:06, the vibration of my phone was the only sound in the room. I hadn't been expecting it, not exactly. But when I saw the number, I knew. It wasn't Grant. It wasn't HR. It wasn't anyone trying to save face with a polite half-apology or some desperate tech fix. It was the chairman's assistant. She didn't waste time. Just said, "Please hold for Mr. Carmichael." Then his voice came through, careful, composed, and threaded with the kind of tension you only hear when someone realizes the floor beneath them is gone. "We need you credentialed again," he said. "Immediately." He didn't bark it, didn't demand. His tone was brittle restraint, like every word had to be chosen with tongs. "What do you need?" he asked. I didn't flinch, didn't monologue. I wasn't interested in rubbing salt in the wound. I didn't need to. That's the beauty of leverage. When it's real, you don't have to raise your voice. "I need a board resolution," I said, reinstating my stop authority, in writing, with 2 signatures, notarized if you want the auditor to sleep tonight. Silence. I could hear a pen tapping. He was writing it down. "And an indemnity letter," I added, "for any audit accusations stemming from the lockout event. I want it in legal language that protects me from all angles." Another pause. Then came the question they'd been dancing around since Thursday. "And your employment status?" I didn't even blink. "I'm not logging into a live compliance test as a favor," I said. "You revoked my access. You removed my status. That was a decision." I let that hang. "Now you can reinstate me with new terms, or you can keep paying the clock." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a negotiation. It was physics. Something you don't argue with, just calculate around. He exhaled through his nose. Understood. Within minutes, my attorney, quiet, lethal, excellent under pressure, sent a single reply to their legal team. All actions must be compliant with the control governance framework as filed. That was it. One line. One reminder that this wasn't just about a button or an insult. It was about the framework, the rules they'd all signed and forgotten, the ones I had never stopped following. I wasn't their fallback anymore. I was their only option. And suddenly, the woman who'd been dismissed as a couch-sitting relic was the most expensive oversight in company history. The timer was still running, and every second that passed proved exactly why I wrote the clause the way I did. Not to be liked, but to be necessary. They met at 8 Mod AM sharp. Emergency session, closed doors, no media, no assistants, no spin doctors. Just the board, legal, and the crater my absence had left behind. My chair was still in the corner of the room, black leather, slight scuff on the armrest from years of silent presence. But this time, it stayed empty. And that was deliberate. I could have shown up, could have walked in with my folder and my calm, weaponized documentation. But the absence? That was the point. Let them look at the numbers and the fallout without me softening it. Let the silence speak louder than the words they weren't brave enough to say on Thursday. On the screen, a timeline played out in brutal, irrefutable clarity. Thursday, 3:41 p.m., revocation of credential. My name initiated by Grant Halverson. Next to that line, a blinking red icon, system flag, penalty mode active, all automated, all time-stamped. And right below it, email threads from the client marked urgent. The kind with subject lines like need immediate clarification and contractual breach, messages that send executives straight into private Slack rooms and risk mitigation huddles. Grant tried to do what people like him always do when the floor drops out. He spun, blamed ambiguity, called it a miscommunication, framed the lockout as a standard personnel correction, said I'd been inflexible and resistant to on-site collaboration. He even said the word insubordination, as if locking out the only person legally tied to the stop mechanism during an audit wasn't the real issue. The chairman didn't raise his voice. He didn't even make a face. He just lifted one hand like a traffic cop and cut Grant off mid-sentence. Then he pointed, first at the screen, then at the chair I wasn't sitting in, and he asked one question, one line. Who locked out the only person authorized to stop that timer? That was it. No accusation, no elaboration, just cause and effect, sealed in corporate ink and time-stamped code. And that was the moment Grant understood, not because someone yelled, not because he was shamed, but because his own action had become undeniable in front of the people who sign checks and file lawsuits and terminate contracts. There was no PowerPoint flashy enough to distract from the audit notes. No management speak strong enough to erase the timeline. No ego inflated enough to float above a 7-figure breach event caused by pride. In that room, his power didn't slip. It evaporated, and all it took was an empty chair. By Friday, the machine exhaled. The paperwork came through late morning. Tight legal phrasing, board letterhead, dual signatures, and a time-stamped authorization reinstating my stop authority. Not a moment too soon. The auditor sat in the adjacent room while we executed the stop protocol per procedure. She watched every step like a hawk, checking the attestation trail, logging each digital handshake. At 11:02 a.m., the red clock froze, and just like that, the bleeding stopped. But the damage, that didn't vanish. Money had already drained, several million across 4 days, and more than just dollars. Trust, reputation, credibility with a client that didn't tolerate lapses. Someone had to pay. Someone always pays. And this time, it wasn't me. What followed wasn't some tearful reconciliation or group therapy session in HR. It was settlement. Structured, legal, cold as steel. My attorney handled the details, but I reviewed every line. A contracted consulting fee retroactive to the lockout timestamp. Full rate, no discounts, paid with interest. My role restored formally under a new governance title, this time bulletproofed with new language that made revocation impossible without full board vote. A severance package, not an offer, Not a handshake, but a structured exit wrapped in legalese that avoided fault but dripped in quiet acknowledgement. They didn't use words like mistake or apology, but the zeros on the final page told their own story. As for Grant, Hawthorne Ridge issued a vague statement about leadership adjustments aligned with strategic priorities in Q2. His name wasn't in the memo, but his office was cleared out before the next compliance cycle. His parking spot? Reassigned. His company badge? Logged as inactive. And the real obituary of his career? Buried 2 pages deep in a board compliance update sent only to executives and legal. 1 sentence. Stop authority governance updated following unauthorized revocation event. That was the epitaph. Quiet, precise, brutal in its implication. No headlines, no drama, just consequences. No one asked me back. I didn't want them to. I had what I needed. The paper, the resolution, the truth etched into the system he tried to outmaneuver. They didn't say sorry. They didn't need to. The clock had already spoken. And when time costs 6 figures an hour, people listen.